So today I'm here with Maciek from PatchStack, who is really somebody who's been around WordPress for a long time, and we've probably all learned from you over the past. But in case anyone doesn't know, maybe you could give a kind of a quick bio of what you're doing these days in WordPress.
Okay, so right now my official title is Security Community Manager at PatchStack. I mostly deal with the whole hacker community around PatchStack. So the people who are trying to discover vulnerabilities in plugins, in themes. Yeah, I'm trying to kind of put them together, motivate them, and stuff like this. So for example, I'm running the Discord channel for PatchStack, and a lot of weird stuff around it, like sometimes sending coffee to researchers that did something really amazing, and going to conferences, right? Because this is also my thing.
Yeah, and I probably have seen you around from speaking at conferences and watching a lot of conference recordings online and stuff. But you've been around in WordPress kind of for a long time, right? I mean, I think you've been a contributor and
since always. Like, I even remember the very, very old admin panel. I remember when Kubrick was the default theme. So I can say, yes, I am that old.
And I think one of the reasons we wanted to talk today is because you do have like a unique perspective where you have a lot of knowledge on other CMSs. And, you know, I think it's such an important thing for WordPress to look at these other CMSs and learn from them and not get too caught up in like a WordPress bubble. What motivates you to go look at some of these to the point where you can do presentations on them, which means you're not just experimenting, like you're learning them pretty deeply. What's kind of motivating you to try all these other CMSs out there?
So this is kind of because that while for most of my career I was a developer, at some point I switched to being a dev. And my first DevRel job was at Buddy. It's a CI/CD platform that I worked at. And I started working there as my title was, if I remember, WordPress ambassador. So I was kind of trying to teach WordPress community about the continuous integration and continuous delivery. And at some point we learned that WordPress community is not the best target, because very often we just hit the wall like, do you use Git? No. Okay. So the rest of the plan was already, we really quickly learned that it won't work that well. Over time, it turned out that more and more people started using automations and things like this. But yeah, at that point, I stopped working there. So it was quite funny that the things that I done there, I saw that they started working inside of the, for example, Polish community, like a year after I stopped working there. So sometimes it takes time to introduce some things. But at some point, I started looking into other bubbles, right? Because we are close in the WordPress bubble. We even very often say that, let's do it the WordPress way, right?
Yeah,
and
the WordPress way.
Very often we think that's always a good thing, right? Because we are using the same way. But the truth is that while we are doing it the same way inside of our bubble, we very often love to do things the opposite how the rest of the world does.
Yeah.
For example, we very often see it in PHP, right? Where the world kind of is doing many things in some ways. And we decided to stick to this more, let's call it legacy approach, right? Without a lot of things that the PHP ecosystems offer. But that was kind of the moment when I started looking into those other bubbles, into other communities. And I remember that like two things that really got me so interested were, first of all, Astro, and second of all, it was Statamic. So those were the things that I got really interested in. I even contributed a bit, especially to Astro documentation, because, for example, the integration guide for Statamic is kind of my work. Yeah, and this started to show me that really there are other communities. Very often they do some things better, sometimes worse, because WordPress did really an amazing job when it comes to especially the community.
Yeah.
And when I compare it with others, I don't think there is any other community that is so, how to tell it, diverse, right? Because if we look, for example, at Laravel community, those are mostly developers.
Yeah.
They are sometimes front-end developers. Some of those front-end developers also have a bit of a kind of design skill set, but still, in general, those are some type of developers. And when we look at our community, there are a lot of people who never wrote a line of code.
Yeah.
And from some people's perspective, that's weird, right? Because,
Yeah.
hey, you are building a CMS. Everyone should be technical, right?
Yeah.
But not. It's not the thing in our community where we have a lot of bloggers, marketers, designers, accessibility experts, everyone. And everyone is connected. And that's both great because we can hear a lot of voices at the same time, but also it sometimes makes some decision making slower because every time when we try to introduce something new, it's discussed from all perspectives.
Yeah.
And in the end, it very often takes much more time. So yeah, but still, what WordPress did for many, many years in terms of community, and let's not talk what happened lately because let's for a moment pretend that it didn't happen, right? Let's skip this part. It's amazing to the level that no one else was able to reach. I mean, also no one else has such an enormous community out there. So
yeah.
So WordPress is kind of having a totally different type of problems, of challenges than everyone else, right? Because if someone would say that, hey, Astro is amazing when it comes to managing, let's say, pull requests and how you can easily contribute, and you think, yeah, that's true, because if Astro will make a mistake, a few thousand of websites will crash at most, right? If WordPress makes a mistake, well, we are talking about this 40% of websites. So it's like something totally different, and it's so much impossible to compare. WordPress, yeah, when we look at this market share, it's so kind of impossible to see that there is this one CMS that has this 40% of the market, and the rest is having such a small piece of this cake. It's really remarkable.
And also, when you, there's a big gap from a developer framework to a CMS like WordPress. Like you said, that's not, most people don't use version control. They're not developers. They're not, there's the huge no code or low code aspect to WordPress that makes it really possible and user friendly. And if they make a change to something in some other framework, often that doesn't even get pushed out to existing sites, right? I mean, that's we'll get to that when we migrate to the next version manually, which is how everything other than WordPress works. And we're just updating live sites, on the fly consistently and stuff. Do you feel like there is a big difference because we are the one sort of that has a no code experience? None of these other ones really seem to have a fully no code out of the box onboarding the way WordPress does.
That's true. I mean, WordPress, especially when it comes to open source CMSs, because if you look at products like Wix, Squarespace, or similar, they are very user friendly.
Yes. Yeah.
Maybe I didn't get headphones from Wix at some point, which is still quite sad. But still, I was playing around with Wix some time ago when they announced some new headless features, and for me it was also an opportunity to kind of play a bit more with it, and I was quite amazed. Really, it is user friendly. I mean, when someone says that, yeah, but I know you have to pay for it. It's expensive or rather expensive. It kind of depends on where you live, but it's easy to do. When we kind of start putting all the costs and time we need to spend to make something working, it may turn out that Webflow or Wix in the end is cheaper because you just can click here, there, and it will just work. So when it comes to those SaaS products, we can see that they are putting a lot of effort when it comes to the user experience part. So, and on the other hand, open source product, and this is very often a big problem because in most cases, the open source movement is in general for developers, right? Developers love open source. Yeah. Designers, not so much, because very often they don't get it. It kind of changed lately when we see with the kind of the rise of JavaScript in general, that a lot of front-end developers also have some experience with UX, with UI, with design. Mm-hmm. So we can kind of see that a lot of those websites built based on some JS frameworks look a bit better because people behind it are a bit more experienced when it comes to design. And let's be honest, like the typical engineer style of design is, we can see it very often. Like, for example, let's look at GIMP or something like this. It's like a masterpiece of engineering design, right?
Yes. And I was saying the two ways you looked at it were like, you mentioned Astro and Statamic, and one's JavaScript and one's PHP. And that's like the split we have in WordPress right now, where there's so many people kind of looking and stuff. So did you intentionally end up narrowing down your focus that way, or is that just by accident?
It was kind of by accident, because I remember that with Astro, my story was like, I was constantly trying to find this JavaScript framework because everyone was saying, yeah, go headless, it's so amazing, your website will be better and everything. And I never felt it, right? I tried Gatsby, I tried Next, Nux, whatever, and I just didn't felt it, especially that I very often said that a lot of people were very happy about going headless because their website becomes so much faster. But it doesn't become faster because of headless. It's very often because you just converted your website into HTML. And, there are plugins for WordPress that will do it for you, and it will be quicker, simpler, without having to learn a new template language or something like this. So, and at some point, I remember that Astro happened. It was so version 0.63 alpha. Do not use on production, something like this, right there. And I remember that they promised two things that got me really interested. First of all, the components that are so easy that you can just kind of put plain HTML inside of it and it will work without this extra syntax. So that was one thing, because I kind of felt like, using include in PHP, right? You can put anything in the file and include it and it works. And that was kind of this vibe. And another thing was that you will have, if you don't want to, zero JavaScript on the front end. So I was like, okay, that's something different, right? Because Next.js always will push you quite a lot of JavaScript if you want it or not. So yeah, that was kind of the reasoning when I kind of fall in love in Astro, and then I saw how it is changing, how the whole documentation team works, because like the documentation of Astro is so amazing. And because every time when you submit something, Sarah or Elian will always ask you a lot of questions. They will try to make this new article so much better. And yeah, this is how it kind of should work, right? This is how working on documentation should always look like. So yeah, like those were the things. And like really, Astro is really cool because you kind of can feel the vibe of kind of writing these old PHP websites. When you remember, you first put all the variables on top, right? Then the content on bottom, something like this. So it's kind of it kind of has this small vibe of this old PHP, but using modern techniques and stuff. So yeah, that's the amazing thing about Astro. And with Statamic, I remember that I just gave it a try, and I liked it so much, especially the admin panel. I mean, it is kind of similar to WordPress because on some top level, every CMS, right, is quite similar, right? Because you just put content in it and you have a way to show it on the front. But it was really so nice. And the thing that I liked so much was the fact that, for example, Statamic comes with a few things already in core, like having custom field management, forms. And when we look at WordPress and, for example, ACF, I think that ACF is really one of the most important plugins in WordPress history. I mean, it really enabled so many people to build websites, to build kind of unified interfaces. And the problem is that ACF, when you use it, you feel that ACF is an add-on for WordPress.
Yeah.
It differs. You feel that there is this something that doesn't entirely fit. You see, it's a plugin.
Yeah.
And when you see the custom fields in Statamic, you see that it's part of core and everything just fits perfectly together. It's a small thing because they both work the same. You can create a custom field, then you can fill it with data. So it's no magic there, right? But the general experience, when you feel that, yeah, this is the CMS, this is the core. And when I look at most CMSs, most of them have custom field management. WordPress doesn't. And I don't understand why. That's one thing. And another thing, why for so many years, instead of doing this, we are just at some point trying to kind of cover it up with blocks, with everything. I mean, blocks are cool, but it's not the same. Blocks are blocks. Having custom fields so you can put some data, it's something totally different. And for some reason, we decided to go this way.
Well, that was going to be my next question, because I feel like I've really gotten used to using like a block-based editor for content, for writing long blog posts and stuff. I really like it. I wouldn't want to go back to it. But obviously for sites where you need structured data and post types and fields and stuff, it's not going to do it. But for like Astro, for example, is there a CMS component to Astro, or where does content live? Because I know Statamic is very similar to like a WordPress. You can have flat files, or you can have a database or whatever. But what is Astro's CMS?
So you can either go with Markdown or Markdown X files, which is kind of baked in inside. And it's done in a really cool way, because they have this whole, now it's called the content layer API, but before it was collections, because it kind of evolved from one to another. So when you have a Markdown file, it consists out of two parts. The front matter part, when you put all the data like title, enter the title, publish date, tags, whatever. So here you have the variables, right? And underneath you have the content. So thanks to the content layer API, you can always define a schema. For example, that title has to be a string and it's required. Date has to be a date, right? Because it should be a date. The image is required and it should have more than, let's say, 500 pixel width. And you can like define the types of your content every time. And every time when you make a mistake, you get a beautiful error saying that, hey, you should remember that this image is too small, or you forgot about adding something. So it's a really great thing. And the content layer, because collections, so this was like the first version of it, was only for Markdown and Markdown X. The content layer API decided to, okay, so let's make a next step forward. And you can connect everything to it. So you can either use, again, Markdown X files, like you used to, but you can also connect an API. For example, WordPress REST API, because why not? And you can define a schema to make sure that all the data that you need is there. So it's like a really great mechanism that grabs all your data, it stores it. So it's also kind of like a cache. So you don't have to constantly ping the API for data, especially if you are using not the static site generator, but the server-side rendering. So yeah, you can connect anything that has an API, or you can get like Markdown or Markdown X files from it. With Astro, right? Because it's like the front-end layer. Although, like I said, using Markdown files, you can kind of use it as a CMS. And there is also this quite cool tool. I don't know if you heard about it. The Front Matter CMS. It's done by Elio, and he built a CMS inside of Visual Studio Code.
Okay.
And it's a very universal editor for every Markdown-based framework. Or so, for example, for Astro, it's great. For Hugo, for Gatsby, for Next, whatever. whatever just uses next, you can just use it with this front matter CMS, and it also has a media management, things like this. There also are quite, you can also connect some automation tools. So really, a really cool product. It's for free. It's another open source project. And what's interesting, I will just a small anecdote. It was built because of WordPress frustration, because Elio had some problems on hosting WordPress on Azure, and at some point he decided, I'm moving everything what I can to Markdown, but editing Markdown was quite problematic sometimes, so he built front matter CMS around it. So WordPress was kind of the father of the.
There's a lot of projects that came from WordPress frustration, a lot of other CMSs.
Yes.
For sure.
It's really surprising how many people I learned that they are very grateful WordPress for kind of enabling them to make the first steps.
Mm-hmm.
But like right now, it's like, oh God, never again.
And so there's a lot of people, I think right now, or just in general, are looking at different CMSs. They want to try to know what's out there and learn different options. It's, if you're somebody who works at like an agency, you have clients or something, probably you're going to want to stick to WordPress in a lot of situations because it's a very safe, a lot of clients, they don't want to hear about some new crazy thing. They just want something that's been around for 20 years and is reliable, and that's WordPress, and that's it's powered by
Drupal.
Or Drupal. Yeah.
Because the Drupal CMS that showed up.
Yeah, have you played with it?
I did. It's like, I even published a short article on my blog with kind of how I feel about it. And when I see the stats, it's right now it's one of the top, it's a top rated article right now. And overall, I was very surprised. It still has a lot of those problems that I mentioned before, like, that you can feel that the Drupal is kind of designed by engineers. WordPress is really simpler. It's simpler. But on the other hand, compared to previous release, because kind of right now, if someone don't know the Drupal history, because Drupal right now released Drupal CMS. It's not the same as Drupal core. That's why that we have Drupal CMS 1.0. And I was kind of surprised what happened with the versioning of Drupal.
Yeah.
I remember that we had some bigger numbers, and why we are back to version 1. But Drupal CMS is kind of this opinionated version of Drupal core with some add-ons, with some default sets and things like this. So it should enable you to build websites easier. And definitely, especially if you're not familiar with Drupal, it's much simpler if starting from the core, from scratch. But they also promise that it should even enable marketing team to build websites. And I do not agree with this part of their promise. I think that Drupal is still a bit too difficult. But on the other hand, I would be really interested in how Drupal CMS 2.0 will look like, because it was already a huge step forward. They do have some interesting things there. For example, they have this really amazing AI helper. This was something really incredible, because while you can have some problems with, especially when you come from other CMS, right? You just don't know sometimes where to click to find something, especially that really Drupal has a gazillion of options. I don't know. So I could either start go to Google, but I can have this AI helper enabled and just ask it, hey, where can I find something? And it will help me. Hey, go here and here. But there's also another thing you can do. Imagine that you want to create a new post type. Either you can read the docs to learn where to click, or ask it to learn where to click. But you can ask it, hey, dear AI, please build me a new content type called something that will have this, and this field. And this field should be a type of something. And after a few minutes, bang, you have it. And honestly, this was kind of incredible. I mean, I know that AI can build amazing things, but I didn't saw it connected like this inside of a CMS. So it was quite remarkable. On the other hand, I also kind of felt that while it's amazing, it's also kind of a workaround for kind of this UI that might be too complicated for many people. Yeah, we don't need to polish it as fast as we should because we have the AI helper. So, and with more and more people kind of getting used to you go to some sort of chat and ask for questions. Yeah, it might work. While from my perspective, it still feels weird because I first tried to do something on my own. Yeah. Then I asked for help. I really can imagine that many people might take a bit different approach, and for them, it will turn out that Drupal has an overall amazing user experience. Even if the experience itself isn't that amazing, but the workaround is so great, it enables to do so many things. And like I said, you can ask to do things for you. So great.
Yeah, I see a lot more of that AI generation in WordPress, but I think I think it's some of it is great, but some of it makes me a little sad because you have all these people having AI build little tiny things for them, and that code never goes anywhere. It just stays on their website, and there's no structure to it. Whereas if there was a good like custom fields, custom post types structure in WordPress core that was more like, like well agreed on, and it was easier to build these things, then it would be so much easier to let an AI do it because we would know that it would be configuring it the same way.
Exactly. And like imagine right now, probably when you would ask in WordPress, hey, I need some custom fields and everything. Step 1, install this, or this.
Yeah.
Then tell me which one you choose, and then I will try to do it. But this is this one additional step, and it shouldn't be there. I mean, Drupal also has a field management.
Yeah.
I guess I really feel that almost everyone has it.
Yeah, it's a pretty. I was looking at a demo of, I think it was like Wix Studio somebody was building. Was it Wix?
Oh, yeah.
And it was, it actually, I think they called it collections too. That's kind of a common thing, but it was very, adding fields, editing it in a table. It was kind of what you expect from all of these.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, it's like a constant surprise that for so many years, WordPress doesn't have it in core.
Yeah. So for people that are in WordPress and then they are considering looking around, what advice do you have for people where they should consider looking, or how to evaluate different tools if they want to try a different CMS or even just get inspiration? Do you have like kind of general advice?
So first of all, it really depends on their background and on what they want to achieve. Because one of the things that I very often feel that WordPress is used in many situations when it shouldn't. Because and I feel that we are kind of again in this when history kind of goes this circular way. So many years ago, right, we were building everything with HTML. Then at some point, dynamic sites started happening, thanks to PHP, right? So everyone was building dynamic sites. And it was great because you have this admin panel, you can update everything so easily. On the other hand, security issues, you have to pay for the server, you might have problems with the server if your site gets too much traffic, things like this. So we started to add different workarounds of it, like caching system, better hosting, a lot of this, right? But I say those are workarounds because while they do work, very often we just don't need to have a dynamic website. So when the whole Jamstack movement happened, at the beginning it was kind of going back before this dynamic era, but in a modern way. Sadly, at some point, Jamstack also became very complicated. Because they, at least part of those people started to kind of, let's start doing everything we could do from this dynamic world, but in a bit different way, right? So this was the moment when this movement kind of split, because there is still part of it that kind of is more for making the web simpler. But there is also a part of it that kind of would like to match everything that, when we look at Laravel, for example, has. But in a different way, plus adding some of the new features that are possible thanks to JavaScript. And but when we look at WordPress, we see that a lot of people build, I don't know, simple blogs on it. Like I call them reading websites, that you don't interact with them too much. You just read them. And they need a CMS that is placed somewhere? I don't think so. In most cases, because we have so many cool solutions. Because very often when I say, you should convert it into a static website. But what about the contact form? What about the commands? There are workarounds. There are third-party tools that you can use to solve this problem. Or, for example, when it comes to forms and Netlify has its own set of functions that you can use. You just kind of add the specific name and everything, and it will work out of the box, right? So I really think that 50% of the websites out there could be converted into static, and it wouldn't be a problem. So the fact that right now people are using WordPress is very often because they are used to it. And that's okay, I understand it. And it's kind of a shame that static didn't become much popular, or other didn't start to kind of mimic their idea, because I did like their approach, because you had the WordPress that was powered off, but when you logged in, first you saw that, the server has to go up and start.
Yeah.
So for most of the time, the WordPress wasn't even an attack vector, because it wasn't working.
Yeah.
And it was cool. And this was like the best approach for people who would like to have the best of two worlds, right? So to still have WordPress working, and on the other hand, to have a static website. But if we look at it, for example, because like right now, I'm using Statamic for my blog locally. So I just write everything using the CMS on my local machine, just then push it to Git. I have an automation prepared that kind of push everything into server, and it works. And I do think that more companies should think about building such an approach, but in an easier way, right? Because I wouldn't recommend building CI/CD pipelines for people who aren't developers.
Yeah.
And because enabling this would let anyone use whatever they want, right? Because it wouldn't be a problem. You just kind of install, I don't know, Statamic, Craft, Drupal on your local machine, convert it into static and push.
Yeah.
And when you ask how to evaluate, I mean, first of all, you need to think what you need, right? Because if you need really a simple blog or a simple website that you won't update that much, really Astro without even connecting a CMS, because there's a huge chance you don't need it, or nukes or something like this. There are also a lot of themes or add-ons that will kind of make it simpler. When you really want a CMS, first of all, while we know that owning your data is very important and so on, and I do agree, but very often it's not the most important thing at the beginning, because like I said, it is important. It's really good to know that you can export the data whenever you want. But on the other hand, if you need a website, you need a website, right? So first you should concentrate on having a working website. And this is also a great place to look at those SaaS products, Wix, Webflow. Check them out. Maybe they are perfect for you, because the maintenance isn't a problem. You kind of pay for it. Of course, you have to be prepared that at some point out of the blue, your bill will just skyrocket.
Yeah.
We heard a lot of stories like this, and this is kind of a downside, but we already know about it. So every time when you kind of go into SaaS, you need to kind of have it like at the back of your head that this might happen. So it would be good to kind of learn at the beginning how to export data and how to migrate quickly.
Yeah.
But use it until it works, because if it's a good fit for you, why not? And when we look also at the CMS market, we have like great thing like Directus. Directus is a very cool tool if you are more on the engineering side and you want, because Directus is kind of an interesting mix of a CMS and the database management.
Yeah.
Like both of them. And it works really great. If you also want to, with this more headless vibe, Strappy is also very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really cool tool if you want to use the same data in different places, right? Statamic and Craft would be really great replacements of WordPress because they are quite similar in the way. I mean, out of the box, they offer a lot more because WordPress doesn't offer too much out of the box. There is always a plugin for something. So in most cases, the whole evaluation should be around, first of all, checking how long is it on the market? Is it actively developed? And just trying it out because you might just like it or the opposite. You might just hate it because something, right? Because like I said, with me and Statamic, it was like kind of this love from first sight. It just clicked. It just clicked. I felt that I like it. And yeah, my blog is running on Statamic for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, and I've been really thinking about that for my blog I really like writing in WordPress, but I don't have a need for it to be running on I don't need WordPress in the production environment. It's really, I just need the HTML, but I'm afraid to take the amount of time it would take me to build a front end design in something like Astro, because then I think I'd have to think more about the design, and in WordPress I can be lazy and I can pick the Ollie theme and it looks great and I don't have to put any effort into it at all. But it does make me a little sad that it can't just be a bunch of HTML files, because it would be a lot easier. Right? There's no need for all this server running.
And also one thing that also kind of made me a bit sad about what happened with WordPress themes. If we go back to the times of Kubrick and those old themes, it was very easy, for example, if you decided, hey, I would like to use some other CMS. But it was quite easy to migrate the look, right? Because you just you had the CSS, you had to get the PHP and, find the WordPress functions and replace them. Did you try to migrate one of the block themes from one WordPress to another CMS?
Yeah.
Kind of.
Oh, yeah.
Very difficult to say, at least. Of course, it's not impossible, but it's not that portable as it was. And it was, because I remember I found some really great minimalistic theme. I really loved it. But I didn't want to use it with WordPress. I wanted to kind of play around with Astro. And then I was, so I will copy the CSS. And I'm looking at, where is the CSS? There is the theme JSON and it's And there is a lot of those inline CSSs right now happening. And I was like, so it's not working like it used to.
I can get why they did that. They can pull in just the CSS you need. They can pull in the chunks of, if this block isn't there, don't bring that. But there's also probably 50% of the CSS that's on every page. That's just the style, the main theme of it, the style, the header and stuff that you're right. You can't just grab that somewhere.
Yeah. So like I said, I also get why it happens, but it kind of made me a bit sad. Right? Because it stopped being portable. And I remember when at some point I moved some old Ghost theme to WordPress, because I also like it and it was very easy. I just had to kind of rebuild their template parts and everything into PHP, but the whole CSS and everything was very easily transferable.
Yeah.
And then we are missing this part. It's sad.
Yeah, it's definitely a different era. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time to go through all this. I find it really fascinating. I'm really I want to spend time with all these other CMSs, because I feel like I've been so deep in WordPress that I forget sometimes how simple it is to just spin something up, without saying, hey, I'm going to put 150 megabytes of PHP on a server real quick, when you kind of don't need it.
No, you don't need it. You can just write a few markdown files and voila, here it is. It works. Really, you should give Astro a try, because for those simple things that you want to spin very quickly, it works really good. And I also like the fact that suddenly your website kind of becomes almost automatically an open source project that if someone finds a typo, they can report it and they can create a pull request.
Yeah.
This was one of the things that I when I joined PatchStack, and I really, really wanted to try out Astro Starlight. It's like this documentation theme for Astro. And yeah, right now we have two pages built on Starlight, and we're really happy about the whole flow. Another who is editing our documentation, like this Markdown and Markdown X approach very much. He's like handling it without any problems. And very often there are even months when he doesn't ask me about anything, and sometimes I'm like worried, hey, something stopped working or something. No, everything is fine. I'm constantly updating it. I just don't need your help. I'm like, okay. So yeah, and it works, and people can create pull requests. We can either accept them or not, and it's really cool. It totally changes the approach, and I kind of like it.
And you can start pointing WordPress Playground at repos that have Markdown files, and I've seen people do that. You can open your Markdown in a nice block editor for people like me who love writing I just like seeing my words more visually than I do in VS Code, but I get
it, yeah. But I think from this perspective, you should give Statamic a try, because they have their editor called Bard.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really cool mix of kind of the more, let's call it old school editing approach that we have with, like, imagine TinyMCA, but with blocks.
Okay.
So you can create additional blocks that you can put inside of the text, but you don't have to. It can be still like this whole text file and everything. But if you need something, you can add a block. Those are called sets, Statamic, but it works like exactly the same. And it does, because like in WordPress, we very much see that everything is a block approach. We also see it in Notion.
Yes.
And why I do like writing in WordPress, because I think that when it comes to content writing, the block editor is really good. It's really good. It really feels great. Although when it comes to the fact that the paragraph is also a block, and you kind of always see that it's a block, sometimes it's kind of weird, because I kind of see that text should be at like the paragraph should be like a default state. You don't entirely have to remind me that it's a block.
Yeah.
And in Bard, you kind of see that you have like this text file with those islands, like, let's call it dynamic islands, where you can put whatever you want. You can create whatever you want, right? It's up to you.
Yeah, you don't get trapped inside your list block and you can't get back out of it to get back to the paragraph block. None of that.
Yeah. It's really much simpler, at least from my perspective. Of course, on the downside, right? Because the thing that Gutenberg, or the block editor, did really amazingly is kind of having this perfect balance between making this real-time visual preview of what you are writing, without being entirely what you see is what you get. It was like it's like a really hard thing to do, and I think that Gutenberg really nailed it. It was like it's like a perfect balance. Of course, the problem starts when many blocks, especially when you install them, that aren't the part of the core, have a bit different interface and different things. And this was, for example, very often the thing for which I liked ACF blocks so much, because they do give you, like, every custom field made in ACF has a similar experience, right? A similar UI.
Yeah.
It always will work the same. And when I, at some point, was trying a lot of those blocks, and I remember that I was so surprised in the amount of ways that blocks are handling images. Sometimes you had to click a button, sometimes you had to move it, sometimes it was in the sidebar, and I was like, oh no, I don't like it.
Yeah.
And even if kind of ACF broke this experience, right? Because you always had to, it was a form, right?
Yeah.
But it was always the same form.
Yeah.
So you always the behavior was always the same. And this is the thing that I like so much about AC4, kind of giving this always similar experience.
Yeah. All the components feel consistent. Yeah. Well, anyway, thank you. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but thank you for kind of giving me this breakdown. Where can people go? Because they should definitely be following your blog and newsletter. So maybe you could just let people know where to go to find that.
So if you see my first name and second name, so it's maciekpalmowski.dev or newsletter.maciekpalmowski.dev, and there you will find everything.
Awesome.
Yeah, I try to write a lot about those CMSs, so you will find a bit about, for example, how WordPress and Statamic compares to each other. So if you're interested in this topic, you will find quite a lot about it.
Definitely. Well, thank you. Thank you again for chatting today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really amazing to share this knowledge especially in our WordPress bubble, right? To talk about not WordPress.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Webmasters is hosted by me, Brian Cords. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to like and subscribe, leave us a review, or share this episode. For more, visit webmasters.fm. Until next time.